Welcome to Ready, Set, Hunt. Whether you're an aspiring, new, or seasoned hunter, join us as we share our experiences and learn from other hunters around the country. So, Chris, looking forward to the 2025 season. We've kind of changed up our plans a little bit over the past couple days. We were looking at hunting antelope, but now we've kind of switched to mule deer. Is that getting you more excited? Are you feeling a little bummed out that we're not going to be chasing speed goats or what? I mean, no decisions have officially been made, but that kind of seems the way things are leaning.
I mean, I might just apply for speed goat also and not tell you, so I can shoot one, and then you'll tell me that's not a mule deer, Chris, and I'll say, I know,
You're
I
just
have my
gonna
tag.
you're just gonna sneak away and plug an antelope while no one's looking.
Hey, there's been crazier things that have happened in the world.
Yeah, I suppose.
No, I'm stoked. I much rather hunt, like pursue, stalk a nice muley, probably than shoot a goat. But it's just a different type of hunt.
Mm-hmm.
Speed goat hunting is so fun, and it's kind of like they're easy to knock over.
They are.
So,
If I
um,
if I'm being honest, I'm I'm not bummed, but I thought the idea of just pulling a camper out there and having just kind of a chill, relaxed camp setup with the group would have been pretty fun. But so is hiking in and getting some miles on your boots and stuff too. So, I mean, it's a win-win either way. But I don't know. I don't know.
I mean, you think the camper will take the miles? Think it'll get out there?
Oh yeah, yeah, no problem.
It's got a nice axle.
Oh yeah, great axle. Yeah,
Okay.
but
Because that was one of those Facebook specials, wasn't it? Where you
mhm.
spruced that sucker up and now it rock and rolls. But
Oh dude,
we've also
it's
had some
great.
experiences where you and I, you and I tend to get stuck up north on hunts because of car or trailer problems.
Yeah,
For
that
those
has
of
happened a
you
couple
who would
times.
like context on that, let's just say we've lost some axles and just, I don't know if it wasn't drivetrains, but we've had some items go out on cars that have kept us an extra day or two with our wives breathing down our necks.
Well,
In all due respect, because they should be, but hey, it's car trouble.
and if you drive enough places for hunting over the years, at some point you'll probably have
Yeah,
car
because
trouble too.
that's the problem. Because
Yeah, it's
that's been the
hunting.
problem.
Oh
Yeah,
man.
everyone, just so you know, we've put millions and millions of miles on these vehicles,
Tens of
and
thousands,
they're
but
breaking down out there. It's a hard life, so we're accepting donations and sponsorships.
always. Always.
No, but actually, you're welcome to get some sponsorships. We'd love to promote your products on here.
Only if we like them though. Only if we like them though.
True.
Yep,
That's the honest truth. You won't hear us repping a product that we don't believe in.
that's right. Um Well, hey, Chris. So this week, on this week's episode, we're going to talk about some lessons for beginners on the hunt. Last week, we talked a little bit about some things to do before the hunt. So it only makes sense that this week we'd be talking about lessons for beginners on the hunt. Chris, do you want to recap maybe a little bit of what we talked about during last week's episode before the hunt?
Yeah, let me just go right back here to my notes.
Show notes.
We touched on planning and preparation were the big ones. What do you need to know when it comes to that? Some basic essentials from gear to safety. How do you be successful? Some e-scouting, licenses, regulations. So,
Mm-hmm.
and we had talked about. I think didn't we get into a rabbit hole on an item? Boots. Was
Boots.
it
Yeah, we got
boots?
into a big rabbit hole on boots. There's one
So if
rabbit hole
you
an
want a semi
episode.
boot episode, feel free to jump back to episode 6.
I think it's safe to say that there will probably be at least one rabbit hole per episode. We'll try our best to limit those and try and stay on topic. But a rabbit hole here and there never hurt anyone.
Anyone who knows me knows that Chris loves a good rabbit hole.
Chris, your entire life is just one big rabbit hole.
There's a lot of rabbit holes. For those of you who don't know, the CIA created conspiracy theorists, and let's just say I like going down those conspiracy theorist spaces, not because I'm trying to, not because I'm trying to prove it to anybody, but because I'm just like, I want to ask these questions, and no one seems to want to answer some of these, so I just keep asking, and that's the rabbit hole conversation you'll
Yeah.
probably get once in a while with me.
Hey, I mean, don't get me wrong. I enjoy a good conspiracy theory. I think there are some truly fun ones and fun ones to think about. But I try not to let them let them
Sasquatch.
rule
We
my
should get
everyday
my
life.
brother on here who has seen Bigfoot.
Oh, let's not spoil it. And I don't know. I'm not sure how public he is with that, or if he just kind of keeps that close to the chest with people that are close to him. So let's not say too much about that.
Well,
But
I would anybody who has hunted, right? When you've walked out to the stand or you're in the backcountry, let's be honest. Sounds and shadows can play some nice tricks on you.
that's true. But I also wouldn't really. I don't really think of your brother as a person to like really exaggerate or believe in the fantastical
You
side
mean
of
he's not
things.
me? He's not
he's not
the movie
he's
he's
not
not the movie script writer or
he's not the
the
dreamer,
director.
he's not the imaginative one. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but
There's some backdrop there simply because I graduated film school and I love story. So fantastical adventures, sci-fi, all that fun stuff, everything but horror. Uh,
mm,
I pretty much have a softness to in my heart. I love a good story.
well, Chris, maybe someday you can put that filmmaking background to work in this relationship and in this podcast.
Dude, I just had epiphany that somewhere down the line when we're I was just gonna say when we're 40, and I'm like 40 this year. Never mind. When we're like 50, we'll be out hunting something. I'm guessing red stag,
Oh,
and
jeez.
we will dub this hunt the hunt for Red October. And we'll probably be hunting in October. We'll probably be onto this nostalgic beast within the wilderness, breathing out the mist and condensation from the cool, crisp morning after it's been running after a cow with all of its might, and
you are
boom.
you are literally currently personifying the fact that you are the fantastical and imaginative one in this dynamic. Just with
Does
that
anybody
description.
else have some red stag uh, screensavers or backdrops on their computer? Because if you just Google those, there are some unbelievably majestic photos of these animals, just like elk and deer, but specifically like red stag lives in like New Zealand, and New Zealand is like Lord of the Rings, right?
Hmm.
Hey,
All I have to say, buddy,
now
is
we're on an adventure.
I hope some of your cryptocurrency investments really hit so that you can afford to do one of those hunts.
I'll take you on my dime.
Oh, I look forward to it. I look forward to it. Um, but anyway, let's get back to the topic at hand. Let's talk about some lessons for beginners on the hunt. Man, I mean there's so much that goes into a hunt, Chris. Like we kind of talked about last episode. When you're actually setting foot into the field, when it's actually time for your hunt to start, what would you say are some of the most important things to know going into it? Maybe some things that you might not expect as a beginner. Maybe some things that are overlooked.
Well, the first thing that came to mind, because it applies to me anytime I step out of my truck into the field, is where's the boundary lines? What is my area that I am working through or stalking an animal or setting up in? And that doesn't just go to where I can walk, but where I can put my rifle on something.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to be conscientious of other people, other people's land. What are the rules with that space? That goes with just common decency and respect. And I try to think of everything I do in the field, or it's why I like walking up to conservation officers. I love the space of respecting and like what would my experience be like if I was the other party
Sure.
with myself. So if I'm a landowner and I got cattle out here, I'm probably going to be a little bit off put with some guys walking through with rifles or, you know, camping out in the wilderness, adjacent to my property line or something like that. So it's just being really upfront, honest, kind, and open.
Hmm.
And people, even the cold ones, because we've met some cold ones
Yeah.
out in the field, it disarms a little bit. They might not warm up or open up, but they appreciate the honesty. So I think that lends itself to just respecting, what we do from a conservation standpoint, the ground you're
Yeah.
walking on, the animal. How do
Sure.
I ethically operate in this space
And I
while pursuing something that's really exciting?
And I suppose when it comes to like actual physical boundaries, as in like property boundaries, some of that probably ties back to the before the hunt side of things with prep and the area you're going to be hunting, knowing where those boundaries are, and like you said, respecting those boundaries. I think if you know your map or the map in your head or even on your phone of the area you're hunting, that will help you avoid maybe some of those conflicts that are very avoidable if you do your homework. Um, Talk to me about a
What
little.
what well what
Oh,
let me
go ahead.
let me flip it real quick back to you.
Sure.
What did I miss something that tends to come to mind for you or no?
I think you pretty well covered it. I think a lot of the time we're hunting, we get so wrapped up in the moment that it it's easy to not also look a little bit ahead. I mean, obviously it's very important to be in the present when you're hunting because you need to be soaking in information, you know, on a second by second basis just because things can change so quickly in the field. Um, but also it is important to like really think about, okay, why am I here and what am I going to do to set myself up for success given you know given the information that I have in front of me. Because sometimes when you get to where you're going to hunt, it might look different than you expected, especially if it's a place you've never been before. We touched on that in the last episode a little bit, but also even just the conditions can change for maybe what you planned. I mean, I usually try and keep my eye on the weather and the conditions for my hunt the night or the couple days before to the night before, just to kind of know what to expect and maybe come up with a little bit of a game plan in my head. But I mean, how often has it happened, Chris, where you and I get in the field and the wind is blowing from a completely different direction? And so, like, say if we're hunting ducks or something, it's like, well, we can't really set up in the spot we were originally planning on setting up on because now the wind direction is completely wrong. So the birds are actually going to want to land away from us rather than into our spread. So I think a lot of the times it's important to really think those things through once you get to the spot so that you can set yourself up for success or at least the highest chance of success during your hunt. Um, but I did like what you touched on about ethics. Let's talk about that a little bit. Let's talk about ethics as it pertains to maybe other hunters in the field, because I think that's something that happens quite often, especially obviously if you're hunting public land, even to an extent private land. We've hunted on some pieces where other people have had permission to, and we get there and there's already someone there. And so how do you navigate that? How do you navigate, Chris, relationships or encounters with other hunters in the field?
Well, for me. There's a first come first serve kind of unspoken code. You're gonna bump into other hunters, and you will walk up on each other. You might do that inadvertently, whether they're in a stand or a blind. Maybe they're sitting by a fence post or something, and you, from your perspective, when you're crossing a space, you don't have a visual. And then that also comes to play. You might see somebody from you'd be walking up on them, and you're like, oh, there's a guy up here 300 yards looking down at this gully where we were gonna go. At that point, you kind of feel it out depending on
Maybe the scale of where
if
you're
you're if
hunting.
you're blow if you're gonna blow out any game or bedding areas or, something of that nature, or if you have a clear path to kind of like very quietly walk up and you can connect with somebody. Like we've done that many times. People have walked up on us and you just chit chat. Hey, how you doing? See anything? Get anything? Um,
Maybe like what's your plan? Where are you planning on going? What can we do so we obviously stay out of each other's hair?
I mean, yeah, that you're not going to get that obviously on private land unless somebody's granted access to multiple people. Typically, we have mostly free reign on the private access that we have. There are times when somebody might be out turkey hunting before us, or they might
Mm-hmm.
have something set up, uh, on the east side, west sides of the property, and they've been hunting it all week. And you just kind of have to check, well, I don't see their truck here. So reasoning tells me no one's here, but that also tells you a lot probably about how the animals might have been pressured or not.
Sure.
Somebody's been in the woods, there's scents in the woods. So I think overall, though, when you're thinking about ethics, uh, it's grounded or anchored in safety first and foremost,
Yeah.
because you're trying to disarm any terrible, challenging situation that's going to pop up. You don't want to cause an issue with somebody. You don't want to cause danger or harm to yourself if you're going somewhere you shouldn't be or crossing gates that you shouldn't be crossing, et cetera, et cetera. So that comes into preparation, thinking about your plan, connecting with those around you, talking to landowners, talking to game wardens, listening to podcasts like this one, right? You're trying to become a more holistically educated, I said that funny, but educated person in the field, in the action of hunting. So, and then it's just, I think it's oftentimes our world, we hear like fairness or equity or something like that, but really it's you're not cutting people in line, right? So tonight, I love when people don't understand that, especially when you're driving and there's a lane, there's like a merge lane, and everybody gets over to the left because the right lane's going to end in like a mile.
Mm-hmm.
So then you're by law, you are allowed to go down until the lane ends, and then you have to merge. And there are the people who, and God bless them, God bless them. But it's just like everybody needs to be on the same page from like a driver's ed standpoint, right? So when that person is getting over way early, that is their choice. That is the decision they are making. They found the spot that they feel comfortable getting over in. They, for whatever reason, they are getting over the half mile before. Well, I'm the guy that's like, I'm not trying to speed up and cut everybody off. I'm utilizing the lane that's there, the law that's there, the system that's there been put in place because the taxpayer dollars paid for my taxpayer dollars, your taxpayer dollars paid for this road. Or, I mean, we can have that other discussion. I don't know. Maybe they just printed the money and did it, but I go and use that lane ethically, and it's ethics. It's the rules of the road. It's there. I utilize it. And but at the same time, as a driver, you're not trying to create road rage incidents at the same, so you might also take into account like, okay, well, I'm going to get over a half mile in too, like that's kind of what everybody's doing. And all of us will feel that feeling if somebody comes rolling up past a little too quick and all the way to the front. And then what gets me is when people cross the line, the merge line, the solid line, like the shoulder, and it's like clearly put into the lane, but they're still going and they're
Mm-hmm.
still going down the shoulder. That's when I'm like, I hope you get the steepest penalty and fine from a law enforcement officer, because this is my world too. It's the same with like people littering. Like
Mm-hmm.
this is my world as well. This is my city. This is my home. You don't have permission just to like chuck your junk out the window all the time, because I don't do that to you. I don't throw stuff on your lawn. We have to live in this place together. So taking those principles, like those metaphors, applying them over to the hunting side, there are rules that we abide by. You don't park on like the side of a freeway and hike in like a
Specifically an interstate. That is actually illegal. You can't just park off the side of an interstate, even if it intersects public land.
We have seen people
We've
take
seen it done.
motor vehicles down track, like no longer 2-track areas, and they're driving in the wilderness, like clearly illegal stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And it's what it does is it ignites a fire within you of, I would just say, righteousness. You want the fair chase. Ethical hunters follow the principles of fair chase, which means you pursue your game in a way that gives uh, it a reasonable chance to escape. Right, you're not like trapping
Mm-hmm.
it and then walking up and shooting it. Like maybe you're doing beaver or something like that where there is trapping, but I'm talking like you're not wounding things for the intentionality to cause harm. You're not trying to hurt anybody out there or cause them failure or success for the animal. And when when people can sense, I think, a fairness in the field, it just makes everything better.
Mm-hmm.
It just makes your experience better. You felt like, well, we got to that spot late, or we've shared, we were bow hunting, and I'll let you. I want to hear from you too on this. We were bow hunting, and we're both on two different ridges. A gully down in the middle of us. We see a really nice buck. We're about to move on it, and the guys in the other ridge get up and they start moving. So they're already in motion. They're already deploying the action of going after the animal. Now you and I very well could have hiked down. You and I could have been like, let's make our move, let's get closer. And I don't think that's like a wrong call. Um, if you're trying to cut somebody off, then I think you get in dicey waters. We're on, again, this situation is we're on opposite. It's almost mountains, but very large hills,
Mm-hmm.
and flows down to where this very very nice whitetail buck was grazing with a couple doe, and that would have been just fine. But we made the call. They moved first. Let's see what happens. Maybe it'll kick up this way, and uh, we'll have an opportunity. But
In hindsight, if we had gone down at the exact same time, since that guy was out in the wide open, I wonder if we could have snuck in pretty close and got an arrow in that deer.
yeah, it definitely, looking back on it, I don't disagree at all.
I don't know. I don't necessarily think that would have been the right thing to do, but it's just fun to think about in hindsight how that could have possibly played out, just based off of what we saw. Hindsight's 2020, but based off of what we saw,
I
that tactic very well could have worked.
I am 100% on board with going back and hunting Nebraska in that spot. I know that you might not gain. Well, we saw some nice muleys running around in there, but I know it might not be as, what's the word I'm looking for? Different than the opportunities we have here in Minnesota. Like, obviously, we don't have muleys running around, but we
Mm-hmm.
have some nice whitetails. And is the off chance to see another buck that size in that spot worth it? Maybe. It's just a maybe because the terrain was so thick and they
Yeah.
they were in that brush like nobody's business
Well, but I
through
mean,
those
it's still
slivers.
fun
So
because that landscape is very different than where we hunt here at home. So I don't know.
yeah,
It's not necessarily the top of my list, but I'm definitely not opposed to going back to that area. That was pretty
but
fun.
but yeah, talk to me a little bit about that from your end, the ethics of it, and
Yeah, I think a lot of it comes down to communication, especially when you're running into other hunters in the field. What we've done in the past is, hey, like if say you get to a spot or like the trailhead or parking area, whatever, at the same time. We've run into guys where they literally don't acknowledge you and they just go straight out to what they're planning on doing, and they
they go as
don't
fast as they
go
can
as
to
fast
get
as
all
they
their gear
can.
out, and they like get out in front of you.
Yep. I would say that's not the case the majority of the time. I would say most people are pretty respectful and will at least say hi and then get an idea of maybe what you're doing, which I think is a great way to go about it. Um, I mean, you're under no requirement to do that, but I think it is the courteous thing to do is to just talk to them if you're there at the same time, see what their plan is, and make sure that you're not in each other's hair. And I mean, you'll have to kind of decide on your own how you want to work that, especially if you were planning on going to the same spot, whether you yield that to them or you tell them that that's where I'm going and don't really give them any wiggle room to negotiate that. Um, we've never had any issues with anyone else in the field. It's never been a problem. Most people are kind, courteous, and I think if you treat people with respect, that a lot of the time you'll have respect returned. It's the golden rule. Treat others the way you'd want to be treated. Even if that means maybe you don't get to execute on the exact plan that you had thought you were going to be doing that day.
That will happen.
Mhm.
You should expect possible deviation for every single plan that you have
which
in
is
your
why
mind.
which is why it's important to always have backup plans in case something doesn't pan out. Um, you touched on something that I think is also really important that landowners will actually complain about, especially if you're hunting private land or adjacent to private land. Pick up after yourself. I think that's an important thing to think about on the hunt too. And we talked to a landowner just this past year who accused us of littering on your own land,
On
on
my
your
land.
family's land, Chris. It was a guy who like it was like a farmer who you know was had the crops leased out something.
Leases out to harvest the crop or grow the crops
Hmm.
and harvest them. But we hadn't duck hunted this spot in what, 3 4 years,
It's been years, yeah, and we
and
were just checking
we
it out.
walked out having a low volume opportunity duck opener. So we're like, let's go out to that old spot and check it out. And we creep in, and we have, at times we have some fun success pond jumping. And that's like where, one guy goes left, the other guy goes right, and you just kind of walk. We have a good amount of ponds on my family property. So especially when it's slow, it's nice to just stretch your legs. For me, I just like,
Hmm.
it feels like you're doing something
Yeah.
versus I'm going to say failing. You're not really failing. It's just part of hunting where you have slow days or you don't have opportunities.
Well,
But
especially if it's during the time of day where there's not a lot of ducks flying, it's a great
this
opportunity.
guy, this guy comes rolling through the field in his little like Chevy S10 pickup, like
Yeah.
not a big vehicle, through the field.
Dude, he was ripping it
And
too.
I'm looking for a duck that we had shot. And so I'm in the water with my waders, and he like rolls right in behind us. And
Immediately
I will give
starts
him
interrogating me.
I will give him a touch. His methodology for how he executed his plan was probably poor, but the heartbeat behind it was great,
Yep, he was
and it
double checking to
was
make sure we had permission there. Yep.
yes,
And but then the best
but
part was
he didn't like that answer either. He was like,
no.
oh, like he did not expect that I'm actually the original part of the family that the land's been in the family for years, so
Yeah,
like generations.
so the point of this story is this guy rolls up asking who we are or whatever. We cleared up that this is our family's land or Chris's family's land or whatever. But then he starts talking to me about how there's been this group of people that have been hunting this pond the past couple years, and they have these
He didn't
big.
say it like that. He said you left a lot of shells
Well, yeah,
all over.
essentially, he goes, "You guys left a bunch of shells here the past couple of years. You didn't pick up after yourself." And I was like, "Well, we haven't hunted this pond in like 4 or 5 years, so I'm not sure who's hunting it, but it's not us." And then we found out from one of Chris's uncles later that this farmer and his son had been hunting this pond, or his son had been hunting this pond without permission in past years.
Big no no.
So that was just rich. But to the point of cleaning up after yourself, especially when it comes to like waterfowl or any kind of wing shooting, where maybe you're going through a lot of shells, do your absolute best to pick up your shells or your casings. Um, if you're on public land, it's land that is owned by all of us. If you're an American citizen, that public land belongs to you, and maybe your yard at home doesn't look very nice, or maybe you have junk laying around wherever. I think we all have junk laying around in some way, shape, or form. But if it's a space that I'm going to be sharing with other people, I want to take pride in keeping it clean, keeping it nice. So just pick up your shells. It's
You touched on like the picking up of the shells. They have, for those of you who don't know, they have like magnet sticks where
mhm.
you can reach out, and the magnets on the end of this it's kind of like a long magnet pole, but you can reach out and get the ends of the shotgun shells and it'll clip to it and you just pull them right in, which is nice if you're in a
Yeah.
boat or some water.
Yeah, it's a little
We tend to pick up pretty good.
it can be it's
Um,
obviously easier to pick up your shells if you're duck hunting or something because you're more stationary. So all of your spent shells, if you're shooting a pump or a semi-auto, is going to be kind of in pretty
off to
close
your right or
proximity.
left.
Right.
You
Um,
also also that applies to all trash and stuff though too, because you're gonna
yeah.
bring snacks out there, and while you can manipulate, this is an interesting thought I just had. While you can manipulate the cover or the terrain around you to your advantage, be mindful not to like hawk down somebody's, all like 25 trees or something of that nature where you're just causing destruction, because you shouldn't be, when you're hunting, you shouldn't be invasive, right?
Hmm.
You're not trying to damage the ecosystem. Bugs flying around my office. I can't figure out where they're coming from. Like these little moth bug things. Um, but then that also goes into a secondary thought. We are also not police officers. We're also not, enforcement officers. So taking a mantra where you're going to like go fix something or confront somebody or something of that nature, I wouldn't recommend that. I wouldn't endorse that. We will have, and at times reached out to game wardens for something concerning that we've seen, not in a tattly way. It's literally from a conservation standpoint, like, is this ethically happening the right way?
Yeah.
Is something wrong happening here? And because when that's how you get crackpot laws, that's a terrible term, I don't know, you get half thought out legislation passed, the penalties on everybody,
Hmm.
for things that just keep going unchecked, or people taking advantage of the system, and then everybody hurts from it. So
Which, and the other we should say is if you do actually witness a crime being committed, um, like something you know to be illegal, especially if it's like poaching or something, definitely definitely report that,
mhm.
because it will keep on happening. And poaching is taking from a resource owned by all of us in a way that is not actually feeding back into the conservation model. It's essentially stealing from the citizens of this country. Um, so definitely, if you see a crime being committed, in the field when you're hunting, definitely report that. But yeah, just be a steward of the resource, be a steward of the area and the animals you're hunting. I think that's one of the most important things when it comes to ethics. Something that you should think about as you start getting into your hunting journey. But now let's kind of flip the discussion a little bit to hunting strategies. You can go. There's a lot of content that could be made on this in terms of how in depth we want to go. Seeing as we're a podcast that's kind of more driven, at least at this juncture, at this time, is more driven towards the beginner or someone who's just getting into hunting. Let's just touch on some really high level basic hunting strategies. And since we live in the Midwest and stand hunting is a big part of what we do, Chris, why don't we start there? Why don't you talk a little bit about maybe how to select an area to set up your stand? What makes a good stand location?
Yeah, so the first thought that comes to mind when you're proposing this avenue of topic, I'm getting wordy here. I'm trying to be very thoughtful, and I want to be very clear. That's always helpful to an audience. And the point of getting out into a good position and understanding everything we've talked about so far, ethics, is to uh, take your desired game in the, I would say, simplest way possible. At like one shot, you want a well placed shot. You want to be know where you're hunting. You want to understand the rules. Like, you're doing all these things to get to the one moment where you have the target in the sights of your tool, that whether it's a bow, crossbow, rifle, shotgun, whatever you're using, you're trying to bring that game animal down, and you want to do it, and you want that animal to expire in the quickest way, most ethical way possible. So that goes into like what we're talking about now with like selecting. Stand placement is huge because any one of us can get in to an area and go, this looks like a good tree, and throw up a stand, and you can sit there, and by all means, more power to you if that's how you want to roll. I wouldn't say that you're going to maximize your opportunities that way, simply from the context of, just like you, how you wake up in the morning, what you eat, you have things that you like to eat. There's a routine you have, whether you work out, whether you do, grab a coffee, how you go to work. Maybe you like to connect with people when you get to work, or maybe you like to go straight at it, and you like bury yourself and don't come out until lunch or something of that nature. They're getting at like patterns, and that's how animals absolutely work in their ecosystems. They food, water, and then bedding areas. Like, where do they rest? Where do they feel safe and comfortable? Overall, if you're gonna put up a stand, I would highly advise and encourage you to at least walk a little bit prior to where you're going to put this, like, your desired area for stands. So if you have an understanding of, somebody's giving you a tip, and they're this 20 acres back here, or this fence line, or this is the time that they come out, you need to lean into those things and understand, okay, what, if I'm going to capitalize upon that tip, what do I need to do to be successful? Because if you're pointing the stand the wrong way, that's not going to help. If the wind's blowing a certain way and the stand's in the right spot, it's going to be in the wrong spot because the wind's blowing
Mm-hmm.
the certain way right at the animal. There are all these things to consider. So coming into woods, and I'll just take you down my train of thought. I've moved one of my stands probably 4 or 5 times
Yep.
in like a, what would you say, a 40 to 50 yard
Radius.
radius or diameter. Like, I'm in like a canopy type area inside a pocket of woods. There are some trails around it. There's a lot of game trails. That's the first thing I'm going to speak to while I'm giving advice here. Do you have evidence of movement? Do you have evidence of your animal in the area? And if you don't, it might not be good for you to spend your time there.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
It's kind of
I'm
like
telling you,
it's kind of like
people
taking a
can
dart
set.
and throwing it at a map on the wall.
We know guys that have spots. They are pinch points. And for those of you who don't understand, just think of an hourglass. When you flip the hourglass over and the sand's running through, all that sand has to go through that pinch point right in the center there. That is the most prime spot, that if you were set up, or if you stood in the middle of that pinch point, every single granule of sand has to go by you
Mm-hmm.
to get to the other side. It's the same concept when you're thinking about hunting. Uh, for me, that is what I've learned over the years. That is how I more so think now. Um, that is what, at least in the last year, how my brain has started to conceptualize e-scouting terrain when we're out there. Where is the movement going to be? Because believe me, when you get into the woods or up on a mountain and you're looking around and you're looking, you you can be tempted to look every single way and feel completely overwhelmed.
Mm-hmm.
And the most successful guys know where to look, when to look, and how to look. And that goes into the stand placement. So coming into the stand, like I'm talking about, a really fantastic area because there's a ton of trail. There's a ton of whitetail uh, evidence everywhere in this canopy, and we know that it moves. It's a spot between bedding and feeding. Water is semi plentiful around where
Mm-hmm.
we are, so that is not probably something we highly consider. There is one spot watering hole on the property that we know gets hit almost every evening, which there is a stand there as well. But I first set up facing a certain direction. It's worked well. I've shot a couple deer out of it. as time has gone on, a couple years, I felt like I wanted to move 20, 30 yards north of where I was, which puts me 20 or 30 yards closer to the consistency of the movement I've seen and the bucks that have been coming through. I had a very nice double drop tine buck, which I have video of, and you've seen it
Mm-hmm.
come by me at 40. I think it was right at 40, maybe just a touch over. And I didn't have my bow in hand because he was actually coming straight at me when he was coming through the woods, and I saw him probably 120, 150 yards away. And then when he got to that 40-yard mark, he pretty much 90-degree turned and went towards the bedding. And I could have let an arrow go, but again, there's when you have shooting lanes, and what a shooting lane is when when we're talking about stand hunting, you get up, you put your stand in the tree, it's up there 20 feet, whatever it is, depending on your desired height. You need to get up there, you need to sit down, and you need now to assess, is this viable? Do I have enough cover? Do I feel like I'm hidden enough if I'm going to move a little bit? Do I have shooting lanes, which is you're looking down on the ground from your stand all the way out to whatever your comfortable range is, whether that's a bow or a shotgun or rifle? And do the animals cross within those shooting lanes? So I just had some foliage that was in the way, and just decided I'm not going to take this shot, which I'm a good shot at 40 with my bow. I'm a competent. Uh, I don't know what
Archer.
my spread is. Maybe consistently, I'm probably not outside of. I mean,
3 inches.
on a bad day, it might be 4 inches.
Mm-hmm.
Like bad day when you haven't been out in a while, your muscles aren't warmed up, and now you're starting to feel the strain when you draw back with a bow. After a couple of draws, your muscles just begin to naturally fatigue. But I made the call. I'm not going to just. If he would have been at 30, piece of cake, done. But I couldn't really get a shot in the shooting lane. So long story short, from a stand standpoint, I just asked you to help me move. We moved over, and then we moved up a little bit higher, like 10, 15 yards west as well, because there is some natural trails in there that my uncle has actually gone in there and groomed year after year after year.
Mm-hmm.
And animals like to have a lot of cover around them, but they also like the least path of resistance. They like to stroll, and if they feel safe within that open, smaller area to stroll, that's when you get the opportunities of animals walking right up on you before they
Yep.
smell you. So we moved it around. We pivoted a little bit, some different directions, and again, we're talking about bedding, we're talking about feeding, and we're talking about water.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm in the bedding feeding lane highway in there. Turkeys fly down from the trees all the time. It's a great turkey spot as well. I've had coyotes run through there. I haven't seen the big cats or bears come through there, but they've been spotted it around. Do you have any, Peter? If when you're talking about that and some of the stands that we've placed outside of that, we've built some block box blinds. We've put some stands up. We've moved some stands. We've found some stands that are
Yeah.
no longer in use, and we got permission to commandeer them and
To retire
redeploy
them.
them. Well, we moved a couple around
That's true.
uh,
Yeah.
after getting permission, and then we spruced them up. We fixed them up.
Yeah. After checking their structural integrity.
On our we have so again, I come from a long line of hunting camp, right? And it's like
Mm-hmm.
30 guys, no, maybe like 25 at the height, just packed house, 3:30 in the morning, breakfast, jokes, coffee, excitement, all that. That has conditioned my heart to always be, how do I serve those around me? And that's why I like taking stands that are have sat in the brush for years, and like, hey, let's throw this up here. We could put something here, and then that way somebody, if the wind is blowing the opposite direction, they can't really sit in the stand they like to, but if they sit in this one on the line fence, now you have the opportunity to still hunt that day, for the animal you're going after. So Yeah. With that said, with all the stands we've done and like on your uncle's too, what are some further thoughts you have?
A lot of stand location or stand choice is going to come down to what weapon you're using. There are definitely stands that are great for bow hunting, where there are certain stands that are going to be great for using a firearm. And your firearm stands might not be a good bow stand, and vice versa, right? So our box blinds that we've built have definitely been more so with firearm in mind, specifically the one.
Although the young lady that came out on that raffle, my uncle does a really cool thing and gives back by providing a free hunt on his land, and she took a really nice buck this
One of
last
the
year.
better bucks ever taken off that land, I would say.
Yeah, it
Yeah,
was so.
yeah. Out
I'm
of the
not.
out
I'm
of
not
that
even bitter. I'm not
out
even
of that
bitter. It's just the fact that we didn't put up trail cameras this year,
Well,
and
and
then that
she
happens.
and the kicker is she took it out of the stand that we built. Granted,
Yeah,
it's on
it's
his land.
essentially the one that we call my stand, my
Yeah,
box blind. But good for her. What an
super happy
awesome
for her.
blessing. Like, yeah, and this goes to the conservation side, right?
Hmm.
She's part of the community. She got an opportunity she doesn't normally do. Like, why would we not praise and
Right.
celebrate?
She took a great deer. It's awesome. Um, but yeah, but then you think about my box blind, and it's set up on top of a high point of a hill that's kind of surrounded by CRP and then like mixed food plots and crops that your uncle has planted the past couple of years. So you're able to see a lot, and you have the ability to take far shots if you want to, just because of the vast expanse of openness that you have. So if I were to have a whitetail come out into the open, which I often have, I have an opportunity. But that would be a terrible bow stand. And so no one archery hunts out of it. That stand only gets used for 2 weeks out of the year during the firearm season. Um, but I mean, I think you've really touched on it. It's all about animal patterns and what they're doing the time of year that you're hunting, and that's going to be different times of year, right? So archery season, early in the season, a lot of those whitetail deer are largely going to be on their summer feeding patterns still, so they're going to be feeding in the the late evening all throughout the night, and then once that sun starts to come up, they're going to head back to their beds, be in their beds most of the day, and then you're not going to see them again until late evening.
And that early season, you're going to get foliage, right? The leaves
Yeah.
haven't dropped. It's still really green. It's really thick. So
Hmm.
depending on your stand placement, you're you're not going to have as good a field of view
Right.
in timber as you would in the later season when the leaves have fallen.
Yeah. But then as that season goes on, habits and behaviors change, just due to deer getting ready for the winter, trying to pack on different calories. Maybe the things they're eating is changing, so that changes the locations that they're traveling to. So really, it does, stand placement really does have to be informed by the time of year you're hunting and what your animal is going to be doing that time of year. So that's one of the reasons that, at least at your family's property, we have a lot of different stands set up, and most of them stay up year round, and we just go do some maintenance on them in the spring and summer, make sure they're ready for the season. But we've got a bunch of different stands set up for different wind directions, because that obviously plays a big role. Where we're hunting, northwest is the predominant wind, so a lot of our sets are kind of ideal for that wind direction. Um, but we also have different stands that are going to be better different times of year, or better depending on your weapon choice. So now I understand that obviously that we have private land access for whitetail hunting, and so that gives us some certain advantages that people that are hunting public land might not have. Because if you're hunting public land, there's a good chance that you're having to go into a piece of public land, set up your stand, and then take it down at the end of the hunt. And you're doing that every time you're going into the field. That's a complete.
We've also seen the stands that are just left out there. That is
You're not supposed to
probably
do that.
probably a no no.
It becomes public property
If
at
that
that point if you leave it.
if that stand disappears, it's I don't even know. I don't know this, and I'm not substantiating this, so this is not truth by any means. But if it would might be considered abandonment, right?
I would think so. Yeah, especially, well, and it depends on your state, because certain states have different laws. But I know where we live, you're not allowed to leave stands out overnight. So
Yeah,
I would
you can't throw decoys out in the middle of the water and keep them there overnight
on
and
public
then come
land you
out.
can't. No.
Yeah, just that's a no-no.
Yeah. So yeah, placement's going to really depend on your situation and where you're hunting, but I think that's an important thing to talk about too. In that is that there we can talk all we want on this podcast about tactics and lessons for during the hunt, but at the end of the day, there is really no replacement for just experience and time in the field. There are lessons that we can try and harp on and that we can talk about that you're just not going to completely fully understand or grasp until you've actually gone out and done it and experienced it. Because it's just like reading a book. You could read a book on applied physics, but until you've applied physics, you won't really truly understand physics, right?
Oh,
And
I have to do most of the time to learn.
mm-hmm,
I'm very a hands-on visual. I do have capacity to learn audibly and like read as well. I am almost done with my master's, and that's primarily how it's been. It's just like self reading and concepts and all that stuff, and then you regurgitate that. But you're exactly right. It is there's no substitute for experience. It's the same with like a warrior, right? You can go into the service and be in boot camp and train for 50 years. No, that's you'd be really old by then. But you can train for, 20 years versus the guys on in World War II, let's just take that. They drop in and they've been in France or Normandy or something for a month, and you got these green guys coming in here that didn't have to take the beaches. There is a drastic difference between them knowing how not to get killed versus the new guys, because training and field uh, education, firearms education, those are non-negotiable. Like in my book, they are
mm-hmm,
foundational. They give you the ground to build your style. But everybody should share firearm safety, right? That doesn't change, but you will have a flair for what's successful. So, as we talk about like stalking techniques here in a little bit, a, additional to stand placements, we tend to lend ourselves better with the stock. We like spot and stock. We tend to be successful. We like to be quiet and sneak in, and we've seen it work time and time again.
mm-hmm.
We've been outwitted a couple times, but most of the time we feel like we can really take the situation into our own hands and improve our odds, like percentage wise. Versus if you're just stand hunting, you're sitting there and you only get opportunities for what comes to you. So that's really how we've evolved, probably as hunters, as friends.
Yeah.
But specifically choosing your stand placement, I just want to kind of shore up that thought process and that topic. You just need to understand, is there movement, is there bedding, is there food, and is there water? If you don't have those present, you're not likely to get as set yourself up for an opportunity as you would if you were at a watering hole and you clearly see a lot of mule deer tracks everywhere, like hundreds and hundreds of tracks around this water hole in the mud. That tells you, hey, I'm in it here. And there's a freshness element to it, right? You're looking for droppings, you're looking for rubs and scrapes,
Mm-hmm.
you're looking for beds, right? So for those of you who don't know, droppings is poop. uh, your bedding is you're going to see, like, if you were to lay down in tall grass or onto the ground with foliage and leaves, they're gonna get warm and they're gonna sit there for a long time. So it gives this distinct pattern
Indentation in the
visual,
grass.
yeah, to you as when you're walking through the woods, you can literally walk into their bedroom because
Mm-hmm.
there's beds everywhere. They like that spot. And then you get rubs or scrapes, which is they're going to be specifically talking with deer right now. You're going to get scraping in the ground, not to be confused with turkey. It's a little bit different.
That's
You start to
scratch.
be, yeah, you can tell the difference clearly on those, and you'll get smaller shrubbage or small trees with bucks specifically, where they're rubbing their antlers, they're marking their territory. The doe will eat the bark off the tree as well as the bucks, but that looks different than the uh, scraping of their
Yeah.
antlers. Did I
And
miss anything specifically for like signage
um
outside of
and then just game
those
trails.
types?
You'll see
Yeah.
if it's a heavily used trail, you'll be able to tell. Um it will be, especially if you're in the woods and there's maybe some growth in the understory. You'll see like a very clear path or trail through the brush that is more open, and that's a pretty dead giveaway that it's a travel corridor. Now, that's why a lot of people use trail cameras, is to figure out when are the deer using that trail and for what purpose. Where is that trail heading? Is it a travel corridor between bedding and food, or is it a travel corridor between two bedding areas because deer will bed in different areas? Those are the
And you can
details that you
tell
have to tease out.
if it's a food one because they'll come back with popcorn like in one arm, and they'll have like their soda in the other. No,
So, I mean, you'll find corn cobs on the ground sometimes if it's adjacent to a cornfield.
you can tell a lot by droppings.
Yeah.
If you don't, if you, the more you get into this, if you're stalking animals and you're looking for sign, picking up droppings isn't the end of the world. You're gonna look for how hard are they. You can use your boot a lot of times. Does it come apart? Is it still fresh inside? Moist? Is it green?
Does it taste like
You can
candy
tell.
or does it taste like? I'm just kidding.
Stop it. Um, all I can think of is like milk duds right now.
Yeah.
But yeah, like there were times out there where you can't really tell because let's say you're out really early in the morning and it's frost, like the frost has come and it's hardened the outside of them, and your boot's not breaking it. Like we might pick one or two up and try to break it, and sometimes they don't break at all. Other times
Yeah.
they do crumble, and um, you're just trying to, again, you're trying to understand the patterns of the ecosystem that these animals are living in,
Mm-hmm.
and you're trying to advantageously increase your opportunity for a successful hunt.
Yep. And I know I've
That
harped.
applies to life, right? It's anything
Yeah.
in life. If you prepare, if you don't prepare, you're preparing to fail.
Mm-hmm. And I know I've harped on this in the past, but this truly is important for when you're actually in the hunt in the field. Is, again, know the animal you're hunting, know what it does, different times a year, why it does it, and then based off of that time of year, where is the animal most likely to be? Put yourself either in that place or in a place where that animal is going to be traveling to. That's how you can set yourself up for success, and that's how you choose a good stand location. Make educated guesses, because while you're sitting in a stand and you're not necessarily out moving and trying to create your own success, you can maximize your opportunities in a stand by choosing a good stand location that makes sense.
And I realize that we're talking specifically about deer hunting, Minnesota, Midwest, Northwest hunting from a stand. We'll have some episodes where we get into duck hunting, we get into turkey,
Mhm.
we get into the different animals and how we set up, how we approach it. So don't think this is
Just a whitetail
uh,
podcast.
or that it applies to all your game. As
Right.
a new guy, don't go out and sit in a deer stand to duck hunt. You can, and that actually might work if you have a nice pond with a tree that just works. I don't know. That'd be awesome to actually have a 15 extra feet up
That would
above the water.
actually that we should that might actually be kind of
No,
fun to try
it's
sometime.
I was gonna push back right now because it's actually terrible when we dove hunt to be higher than the horizon.
Oh, for
We
sure.
always, I mean, they're smaller birds, obviously.
I don't think we're ever higher than
Uh,
the horizon.
no, sometimes when we get up on the top of the pit,
Yeah,
it's hard to see down,
that
especially when the light, like the sunset's coming, and it's
that comes from experience and having hunted together a lot and knowing where people are at. We're pretty good about that. But yeah, it's probably not the safest practice in the world.
no. I'm not even talking about safety. I'm talking about when you're watching the bird come in, you lose the visual because they blend in as they're
Oh,
flying
yeah, they
below the
blend.
horizon line.
Sure.
Like it's no different if they were flying like below the tree line. So when they're up in the
Hmm.
sky, you can clearly see birds, but if the birds are flying through trees, you don't see them till they're blind, like blown by you. But
Yeah.
let's pivot here a little bit, and I want to tap on stalking techniques. So
Mm-hmm.
let's say you are, again, we are playing off of whitetail, but we get out to the stands, and this happens often for us. We'll sit for 5, 6 hours, sometimes more, sometimes less. But if we've been there a couple days and it's, let's say it's crazy windy or it's rainy, like there's maybe some weather going on, maybe you're getting cold in the stand, we might simply, it's from a hard investment too, because there are times when you, as a hunter, at least for me, I'm like, oh, I got it. I can stay out here 28 days. Like you're not cold, you're feeling good, you got the motivation, you know the big ones in the woods, or you've gotten some good opportunities on some ducks. Like you can stay out a long time when the conditions are right. Like if we're sitting in a boat and just having a great conversation, the time passes fast.
Mm-hmm.
But there are also those times when you hunt and you're out there an hour and you're like, this is killing me. This is I am maybe you have so much going on in your life. Maybe you're tired. Maybe you didn't sleep well. Like all these things come into play. Maybe you're thinking about money. This is life, guys, and as you're not removed from it just because you're out hunting.
As much as we'd like to
Uh,
try, it's sometimes it's impossible to get away from.
yep. And those factors on both sides that I just named might not even factor into this. I'm just saying those things are present when you're hunting and your heart changes, your mind, your placement of your mind. You might jump on your phone. And it's happened where I like, man, I haven't seen anything in 4 or 5 hours. And you pull out your phone, shoot your wife a message, you scroll, and then all of a sudden there's a doe standing 20 yards from you. It's happened. And if
Mm-hmm.
it will happen to you the longer you hunt. And you're like, crap, it just it just snorted. It totally saw me look up, even though I looked really slow. But all that to say, you and I might shoot each other a message. Hey, I haven't seen anything. It's super slow. Do you want to go grab brunch? Or like, I'm super hungry. I'm done with my protein bar. Let's get up, and when we head out, why don't you come down the fence line? I'm going to come through the woods, and we'll go really quiet. And that gets into the stalking techniques, right? So
Mm-hmm.
that's what I want to tap on now is stalking techniques. Specifically, you have to understand three things. You have to understand wind before you do any stock. You have to understand the wind. That is your number one in my mind, even higher than being quiet or patience. Because if it's super windy, you don't have to be quiet. Like
Not really.
you don't have to be conscientious of your footsteps. You like the wind. If there's deer in the field, you can literally walk right out. If it's windy enough, you can walk right out of the woods. They never hear you. They don't see you if you're low enough. But that thought of wind is just a simple thought. It's not
Mm-hmm.
long. You don't have to spend hours thinking about it. It's just where's the wind? How would this affect how I'm walking out or traversing the terrain? Then it's being quiet.
Yep.
And being quiet provides you opportunity for possibly walking up on something. I've walked up on deer 10 yards. And I'm not exaggerating. I'm on a ridge coming over and I'm being quiet and I literally walk up and I'm like, there's a doe standing right in front, like literally right in front of me. She doesn't even know I'm there. She keeps on foraging and goes down the ridge, right? And then it's patience because, like I said, when you're being quiet and you understand the wind, she didn't smell me, she didn't hear me, which is going to allow you, if you're moving methodically, if you're understanding your steps, being calm, and you're leaning into patience, you can create an opportunity for yourself that you wouldn't normally have by staying in the stand. And then once you've identified the target and you're like, yep, that's a whitetail and it's standing right in front of me, or maybe it's 100 yards away, being patient. You don't rush after it. There's no charging going on. There are many times when you and I have gotten down on our hands and knees and we're like belly crawling like in the military, large distances. So those are the kind of three things I approach with stalking animals
Mm-hmm.
for technique wise, and we've applied that to quite a few different game. How have you experienced that from your perspective in our dynamic, and what has been like don't do that ever again, and what has been a this has to be present every time.
Yeah. So something that I think about a lot and I've experienced and I've just found to be so true. You'll hear a lot of hunters say, or like a lot of really experienced hunters say, that one of the biggest mistakes that people make when they're trying to move through space quietly is they will look at their feet, because they're obviously afraid of stepping on a stick or snapping something or stepping on like a crunchy leaf or something. And there is always that risk, and you do have to be cognizant of where your feet are going when you're trying to be quiet. But what you're actually doing is you're handicapping yourself, because you're so focused on your feet and being quiet that you're actually completely unaware of your surroundings and what's maybe right in front of you. Um, so this doesn't, what I'm about to say doesn't actually have anything to do with hunting, but I've found it to be a very relevant parallel. So I have an uncle who was he was in the state patrol for like 35 years or something like that, and we were talking one time about when they are learning how to drive defensively, but also like in a car chase scenario. He said that when you're driving at high speeds in a car chase scenario, you're never supposed to be focusing on what's directly in front of you, but you're always supposed to keep your eyes on the horizon, because not only then does the focus, like your main focus, are you focused on what's ahead, but your peripherals are actually taking in everything that's up close to you, that you're not, that your focus isn't directly on. So that's how they're able to maneuver through traffic and other cars while still maintaining their eyes on the perp, or the car that they're chasing. Right. So I look at stalking and moving through spaces quietly and effectively in the same way. You're going to naturally want to look at your feet to make sure that you're not crunching anything or making noise. However, if you keep your eyes focused on where you're headed or where you're trying to get to, and let your peripheral vision do the rest, you'll actually be very surprised at how quietly you can move through a space. Um, Now, is it okay every once in a while to stop and maybe look at a little more what's in front of you, especially if you're going through an area that has more obstacles? Maybe it's thicker brush, that kind of stuff. Absolutely, just to make sure that as you move through, you're not making a ton of noise. But don't let what's right in front of you be your focus. Let where you're going be your focus, because you'll just be a lot more successful in that way. And then also, you're not going to miss something, because deer and other animals that we hunt typically have better senses than we do, especially when it comes to sense of hearing. And they're going to hear you from a lot farther away than you're going to be able to hear them. Our eyesight is better than most animals, except for like turkeys and maybe some other birds, but their hearing is way better. And so you want to use the senses that are your strength to your advantage, to try and outplay the senses they have to their advantage, right? Um, but you want to use your eyes, because that's the strongest sense we have. In terms of smell, we're one of the weakest. In terms of hearing, we're pretty good, but not anything compared to some other animals. So our eyes is truly our strongest sense. So we want to really tap into that and use that. So using your eyes to find where you're going and to focus on that is going to be really important. Um, Another thing that I think about, Chris, is having a plan. If especially if like you're getting out of a stand and you're going somewhere, really having an actual plan of how you're going to get to that spot, rather than just like kind of trouncing through the woods and taking the shortest route possible, because the shortest route possible might not actually be the best route. It may in your head seem like the best route because you're going to get there the fastest, but that might potentially kick up an animal that you're not meaning to kick up, or it could completely ruin your hunt by going the wrong way, by not paying attention to the wind, by going through an area that might be a bedding area, even though maybe it's the shortest route. These are the things you have to think about in the field when you're making a move and when you're stalking. Um, so, like rule of thumb, if you're stalking or even just moving from point A to point B, try to move with the wind in your face. So that way anything that you're moving towards isn't able to smell you. If the wind is at your back, then anything that's out in front of you, especially if we're talking about deer that has like a crazy sense of smell, they're going to be able to smell you from like a
Or
mile away.
elk.
Or elk, really any ungulate species. They're going to be able to smell you from forever away. So yeah, I think that's kind of what I think about when it comes to stalking, and just trying to make your presence on the landscape as minimal as possible, using landscape features, whether it's hills or draws or whatever, to hide yourself when you're traveling. If you're moving through a wood lot, trying to move where trees, like large trees, are always in front of you to break up your shape and your outline. Um, I think those are probably the main things that we've learned.
Yeah, we look at we touched on our elk experiences last year and the the frustration that came out at the end from blowing the opportunity. As I've had, for those of you who don't know, the wind blew the opportunity. It was as we get into patience and persistence, like, and Peter just said the shortest way isn't always the best way. Trying to force something can work, but you are creating a scenario where if you're forcing something, oftentimes, at least in my mind right now, I won't substantiate this with saying it's absolute, but you can put the animal more on edge
Mm-hmm.
from a movement and a smell standpoint. And that's like the shortest, coming through the woods. You mentioned the shortest way possible, the fastest way might not always be the best way. When we're thinking about what happened with our elk hunt, and we put on miles, 50 plus miles on our feet, pretty disheartening from the expectations that we had set for ourselves going in as first time elk hunters, like practically doing it ourselves, not feeling out of my element anyway. And I don't think you would feel out of your element anyway either, because it only takes, if we would have shot one or two at the end there, we would have come out of that thinking, wow, we were really successful. Um, but again, when you don't come out successful, you learn a lot about yourself in any place in life, whether it's business or family or as a husband. So I look back to, is this a formative, like foundational memory on the par with the really very large whitetail buck that I wounded when I was, I don't even know now, 19, or I don't really recall. It was might be a little bit older, but I was using an open sights 870 shotgun, pump shotgun,
Was this
killed a bunch of deer.
the really big one that we're talking about?
This is like the 14 or 16 pointer in my Uncle Jim's woods.
That was maybe 7 years ago. So you're
Was that close?
mm-hmm.
It seemed we've put on a lot of hunts. Um, I don't think you were hunting with me then, though.
Yeah, it was. I
Really?
think it might have been
This
like
is before I had.
I think it was like the first year I was out there. Anyway,
Okay.
doesn't
Well,
matter.
anyways, like when you see, I don't even understand. It was like watching a bull elk move the herd. That's the experience I had with this buck, and it 12 to maybe 15 doe. I'm not, in no exaggeration, all of a sudden started to appear kind of out by your box stand, and they were coming up this lull towards me in the stand. Go figure that girl shot that very, very large buck this year. And I see antlers behind, and I'm like, oh, there's a buck here. And when I saw him, as I just, there is something about buck fever, and I had it fully.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so to have shot that gun so many times, had been successful at shooting and dropping deer so many times, to be put in that situation and hit the front chest area of that buck, and then him to go like 20 more yards and shoot again and not to recover that deer, really changed me as a hunter, really changed me as a person. I mean, that's like, you don't want to wound anything. I think if you have any morals or consciousness operating in you, you're first seeing a very beautiful animal that God's created. And to be out there is a privilege. We're back to honoring, stewardship, conservation, all that stuff. But that really bothered me.
Mm-hmm.
So to go out, and that's kind of an evolution where you started to see a lot more scopes come into the playing field. We're in a shotgun zone. We've touched on this as well. In Minnesota, there's a shotgun rifle line. We're not to the rifle line. We're like a mile and a half away from it.
Ugh,
And
kills me.
please, legislation, please come through and just get rid of it.
A new
But
bill has been introduced. We'll see if it gets
and
any
we're
traction.
next to what? We're next to Wisconsin, where 2-3 million hunters go out every year, and they seem to do just fine with no shotgun line. But so long story short, I went out and got this Savage 220 20 gauge slug gun and put a scope on it. And the idea was something I touched on earlier in this episode, which was you want to take an ethical single shot and drop that game animal, as quickly and as effortlessly painless as possible. And then you want to recover it. That's the goal. So getting to the elk scenario, I'm feeling like the windage thing changed, like sunk in, because we were 600 yards away,
Mm-hmm.
and it was literally the worst case scenario for wind I think we've ever had in a hunt. Like from where we were hiking, probably an extra 1,600 somewhere in there yards to get to where we were when they winded us. Was it that far? It was quite a distance. We were hucking it.
It was probably
But
close. It was probably about a mile. It ended up being about
oh,
a
was that
mile.
far?
Mm-hmm.
So, well, and again, my brain was telling me we could do this, and we could sneak by in front of this, because we had to get in front of this property line to honor obviously the person who owned that land, which was silly because it's like in a when you think of it conceptually on a map, it's a peninsula in the middle of all this state land or public land. But that's a non-negotiable for us as hunters, and it should be for you too. You don't bend or break those rules to win and manufacture the scenario that you want to have at the end of your hunt. So I just thought we could squeak by and get in front of that property line, so we were still on public and we could traverse it straight across, and we'd be in front of them from a windage standpoint again. And that just crossed over at that corner. Mm-hmm. And in hindsight, you should have just said, Chris, we need to move for wind, which I think you did maybe a couple times. But from my brain standpoint, from it getting to my head and understanding that, and then them literally putting all their noses to the wind, smelling us, and then taking off. Super disheartening. But I'll just say the patience and the quiet movement, the tracking, the observation, having your eyes up, all that we've touched on right now. Again, we started with the wind, and I think now going into the field, I don't just know it, but I've experienced it in a way that has, I guess, matured my appreciation for the importance of it, and also I'm pretty strong-willed. I'm very strong-willed in life, and I believe what I believe strongly. And it's not. I wouldn't say anyone who knows me. At least I hope you can speak to this, Peter, because we're on here, and you're one of my best friends. You know that I'm always after like the deeper right thing, the truth of it. I want the purity of it. And if you have that solution and you show me, I'm totally surrendered and I don't have to fight. Like, oh, you were right. Totally right. And I like that. I like learning and I like maturing in that way, because I don't want to step into any room or scenario where I think I'm a know-it-all, or I think like it has to be this way. I have my experiences just like you who are listening on this podcast, in marriage and family and life and school, work. But those aren't always there are elemental, like foundational truths that we all share, like we all bleed red. So I'll get on. I see people in the world as like we all bleed red. Like there is no difference for me. I obviously see culture. I obviously see traditions. And I appreciate different walks of life, and I love those things. I love different ethnic foods, and I think that's so fun and interesting, and I want to know more. But specifically from like an experience like hunting, all the things that I had learned that were quote unquote true for me from a windage standpoint or the tool I was using, I thought like with that shotgun, oh, I could kill anything with that thing because that's I've been doing it. Only to realize that the scenarios that presented themselves for taking those game or those deer over the years happened to work out well a bunch of different times. And whatever the reason, if my shot was a little high or low, or it doesn't lend itself to the same as having like crosshairs on your rifle. And that's not to say I didn't practice with that one. It just, when you have crosshairs and your scope is on and you've practiced with it, you know, if you put it on that animal, they go down. So back to the windage thing, it's like now I've experienced in the same way. Like I've been around wind the whole time hunting just about every other game and
Mm-hmm.
appreciated it, but not like experienced the failure of it, of not really honoring that in its place. So and that bleeds over to you, that bleeds over to me surrendering more and leaning into like, okay, I got to listen more to Peter in the field on things, and I have to make sure I'm hearing what he's saying, not just sticking to what's in my head, or we can get this animal because we do that a lot,
Mm-hmm.
and that's really fun. But I don't want to be overbearing at the same time. And so as you're listening to this as a a listener or a beginning hunter, we're all trying to find a maturity in this process over the years. At least I do, and I like being refined. Like it's uncomfortable, and I was ticked as heck for being 10 days out there. We were all tired, we were all hungry, we were all cold. We were like, it was all of it,
Yeah.
and it made me think. I was ticked at like I was done with you and I was done with Drew. And it's not because I don't love you. It's just like I have to detox. Like, right, you're in a hyper 10 days, hyper focused scenario where you're constantly going and trying to excel. So
Yeah.
I'll leave it at
Constantly,
that. And
constantly getting your butt kicked.
I want to, I want to hear more from you from the mental side, because I guess I was tapping into the mental there at the
Mm-hmm.
end, and kind of how my experiences and others that are listening, or you, um, I'm trying not to bleed this over like to politically or culturally or different things, but we have to be careful about exerting our own perceptions, and I'm really applying that to hunting right now, without considering that you could uh, do it a different way,
Sure.
or take into account better information, and that's what lends you to grow as a person and a hunter. So,
Yeah.
talk to me a little bit about that role for patience and persistence in our success or failures.
Yeah. Well, I think there's no better learning opportunity or experience than failure. We ate a pretty sizable slice of humble pie on that elk trip. I think we had sky high expectations. We had a group of 5 of us, and I mean, I think that
And we should have had a super tag because we would have shot 50 deer. We saw deer everywhere, and just there like the elk. Oh,
from the mental side, I think on the top of expectations, I think expectations is a big thing going into the field too. I think it's good to have you know it's good to have expectation, like it's good to have the expectation that I'm going to shoot something, but it's also good to have the expectation knowing there's actually a good chance I might not as well, and being okay with that. um, Obviously you want your goal, you have a reason you're out there, your goal is to come home with something in your cooler. It's like that's why we do it, that and the camaraderie. We've talked about all the reasons that we hunt. um, but failing repeatedly can be very, very taxing, and especially in our case when we were out there for 10 days, failing pretty much constantly for 10 days. By the end we were just mentally wiped, and it was the end of our hunt, and I think we were all happy to be going home, but at the same time, literally just a couple days later, the little thoughts start creeping in your head, like, oh, what could I have done different, or what would I have done different this time? And we're going to talk about that in the next episode, or our next podcast, about kind of lessons for beginners after the hunt. I think that's really the mentality is really going to play a lot into that topic too. Um, but I think just being able to just kind of pick yourself up even after those failures and just get back into it, and learning from the mistakes you made, or learning maybe even from the successes you had. Um, but for me, almost having an expectation that something might go wrong in the field is a healthy place to be, because you're able to then pivot that much easier. Um, and again, that's a skill that you will learn with time. That's a skill that you'll learn after having many failures, and a skill you'll actually learn to have from having successes. Because I think a lot of the time when you have success, it's also easy to look at, okay, if that had gone a little bit differently, what would I have done different? And I don't want to touch on this too much, because I feel like I'm getting ahead of myself into what we're going to talk about next episode. Um, but yeah, from the mentality side, I think it's super important. Whether it's sitting in a tree stand, freezing your butt off for hours, it's very easy for your mental game to break down, and to be like, oh, I haven't seen anything in a couple hours, so probably I'm not going to see anything. It's easy to get out of that stand early. It's easy to quit. It's easy to give up. It's also easy to take shortcuts and saying, oh, well, the wind's not right, but if I just go this way for a couple hundred yards, it won't be that big of a deal if the wind is at my back. But in all reality, that could be the deal breaker for your entire hunt. And so I think trying to do things by the book as best you can, even if that means deviating from your original plan, it all comes down to trying to maximize your opportunity and maximize success, even if that means doing something different than you originally planned. And that can be hard mentally. I can't tell you how many times we've gotten out into the field, especially out west, where it's just everything is so much more expansive and big than you can ever even really imagine, especially after doing all this e-scouting. And maybe you have to pivot and do something different, and you have to come up with a plan right here, right now. And that can be really hard, because it's almost like paralysis by analysis. I mean, how many times have we been in a situation where we're literally standing there for minutes trying to think, okay, what do we do? Like, we don't have a lot of time. We have an hour of light left. What do we do with this last hour? What can we do to maximize our time? It's one of the most frustrating things, but it happens
Yeah, it's not
inevitably.
not only that, but like when you get into e-scouting, you're looking at maps, especially at the beginning when we got out west, not being able to understand how big the land is,
Mm-hmm.
and you have a concept from probably high school, or running a mile, or maybe walking. Everybody has some concept, I think, of walking a mile in their life, but none of us typically have tracked that mile by traversing terrain that's like through woods, or chasms up and down valleys, gorges, anything like that. So when we got out there the first couple times, I mean, Nebraska was the first time, then we got into Wyoming, into Montana. You're like, oh, this 5 miles in is more like seems more like 50 miles.
Mm-hmm.
50 miles in, especially when everything's on your back. So I think, yeah, just setting reasonable expectations,
Yeah.
and your mindset, again, being ready to pivot, and being okay to, I think I think one of the most exciting parts of the entire hunt, it's probably the second, outside of taking your animal, that moment when you get to pull the trigger and you hit your target, and you've got one on the ground, is the expectation building. It's the
Mm-hmm.
camaraderie that, like, you're getting into the journey. There's a goal out there. We have to do XYZ. There's nothing more unifying from birthing a memory and an experience together, camaraderie, than that initial uh, hike out or drive out, or
Oh man,
you know,
for me it's almost the drive in, especially if you're driving from a place that's relatively flat like where we live, and then you're going out west and you just start seeing the mountains and the horizon, and they're getting closer and closer and bigger and bigger. It's just it
yeah,
there's something so cool about it and so exciting. I truly hope that almost everyone gets to experience something like that at some point, because it's not something you can really put your finger on. It's just so exciting. uh
yeah. How long we been chatting so far?
we're at about an hour 20.
Okay, well, let's just touch real quickly on this last point. When to do safety measures in the field. So that's lessons for beginners on the hunt is obviously the what we're talking about. We're on the hunt. What are some lessons or safety measures in the field? Let's start by just talk to me a little bit about the basic firearm safety in your mind. Like obviously there's bow safety from uh you know your broadheads, but those are
Hmm.
typically going to be housed in
In a
some sort of
in a quiver or
you're in
something.
your quiver or something like that. You're
Yeah.
probably not going to have one knocked very much, but things that are sharp, knives, if you have a sidearm, you're in bear country.
Make sure it's in a
Just talk to
holster.
me about yeah, just talk
Yeah.
to me about some of those initial experiences and what you've learned on those as you've gotten into utilizing your firearm, hiking, putting it on your pack,
Hmm.
sidearms, all that.
So I think there's gonna be two, in talking about firearm safety. I think there's gonna be kind of two classifications, or maybe three. Um, if I am, especially out west, but also if I'm like walking to a tree stand or something like that, if I am not actively hunting, or if I'm really just kind of traveling from point A to point B, if I'm carrying my rifle, I do not have a cartridge in the chamber. Um, I prefer not to have a cartridge in the chamber until I am getting ready to shoot. And that is not always super convenient, because that it can make quick opportunities a little more difficult. But that's why, again, I kind of more classify that to just kind of walking into a stand, or out west when you're maybe hiking or something like that. The main reason for that is I don't want to leave any opportunity for an accident. If I were to like trip and fall or something and fall on my firearm, if there is a cartridge in the chamber, even if your safety's on, if there's a cartridge in the chamber, there is always opportunity or the chance of a malfunction, and I don't want to have an accidental discharge and either hurting myself or someone else around me. So that's kind of a rule I live by. I don't hike with a cartridge in the chamber unless I'm in an active hunting scenario where I might be actually physically holding my rifle as opposed to have it strapped to a backpack or slung over my shoulder. Um, if I'm actively hunting,
That
then
that,
sometimes I
that
will
doesn't
have a
that
cartridge in the
doesn't lend
chamber.
its that's a little different than bear country because your sidearm you should have one in the chamber.
Yeah,
Um,
but if you're but also
yeah,
if you're carrying a sidearm in the in the back country, in bear country, um, you should be well trained with that sidearm, um, knowing whether or not it has a safety, and also it should be in a secure holster, a holster that's going to carry your firearm. That even if you trip and fall, it's not going to become dislodged from that holster unless you intentionally remove it. Um, so then, yeah, I kind of designated active hunting being a little different when when you're actually physically carrying your rifle with your hands, with the intent of possibly using it in a quicker, more of a snapshot scenario. The other one's going to be walking with a shotgun, whether you're upland hunting or you're duck hunting or you're actually holding your firearm. Same thing. If you're walking with a loaded weapon, it is very important to be aware of your surroundings, kind of like we talked about with stalking. um, in the you want to make sure that you're not tripping over anything. You're aware if there's any rocks, any fallen trees or logs. If you're walking in tall grass, being very careful, knowing that there could be something, a tripping hazard hidden under that long grass. Just being very very intentional with your steps, and then also just being aware of who's around you, how close they are, where they are, whether they're behind you, in front of you, directly to your side, and then also knowing your shooting lanes. Again, this goes back to more like bird hunting, duck hunting, upland hunting, making sure that everyone knows their assigned shooting lane, where they can shoot, where they absolutely should not shoot. Um, and then just constant muzzle checks, making sure that your muzzle is not pointed in a direction where it shouldn't be, whether that's at someone or at something that should not be down the end of your barrel. Those are the main things I think about for firearm safety. We've touched
Also,
on that a
also
little bit.
know, yeah, also knowing your firearm beyond handling it out in the field too,
Mm-hmm.
right? Have you cleaned it?
Yeah.
You know, are all the screws, is everything tight? Have you noticed an issue with the stock? Have you noticed something going on with the barrel? Like if you're going into scenarios where you want to be successful and you've left these unattended, uh, shame on you.
Well, it just opens doors for either accidents to happen or just malfunctions of the firearm. I think another important thing when it comes to handling firearms in the field is knowing the actual how your firearm operates. I think every firearm owner should know how to take their weapon apart, put it back together, and knowing the way it actually functions. Because I mean, how many times has it happened, Chris, where we've had especially with shotguns, we've had a shotgun jam in the field. Now, some people think, oh, a jam, just unjam it, whatever, move on. But that can potentially be a dangerous situation. It really can, depending on how the gun jams or why it jammed. So, knowing the way your actual
You
firearm
might have thought
operates.
the shotgun went off, the second shell or third shell or something like
Mm-hmm.
that, and it didn't. And you set the gun down and it goes off. Or I mean, we're pretty good about it. We don't see a lot of concerning situations at all, at least in our time together. I think the only time is maybe been like the muzzle when we're passing some trees or something like that.
Or a
And
rifle sling slips down the shoulder a little bit and the barrel points back or something like that. I know
yeah,
that's happened.
then we are
Pretty quick to
hey,
correct that.
stop, you're loose right here or something like that. So
Mm-hmm.
um but yeah, just use common sense. It's a privilege, and you're playing with life, and
Mm-hmm.
you're also like as your tool from firearm safety standpoint, guys. You've put in a ton of work to put yourself in a position to create or get that opportunity, and to have the most important moment, which is utilizing your tool out there, your firearm or your bow or whatever it is, and you're not ready to let that arrow go or send that cart or that shell. I don't know what you're doing out there then. You
Mm-hmm.
might as well go camping.
Yeah.
Um, you have to be successful and prepare. So when we get into, let's jump into first aid basics real quick, essential
Yep.
skills and knowledge to have here. We just did something new for the first time going out west, added something to the repertoire, courtesy of uh, my brother and a little bit of training
Mm-hmm.
ahead of time. Why don't you touch on that and talk to me about first aid?
Yeah. It's probably not going to happen. Hopefully, it doesn't happen to you where you're in a situation where you have to actually use for a first aid kit or emergency skills in the field. But there is always the possibility you are carrying a gun, you're in terrain that could lead to injury, you're just doing an activity that is by nature a little more dangerous than maybe your everyday life, unless you're driving a car every day, but which most of us are. But something we added to our first aid kit this year is a tourniquet, which I guess I had never really thought about in the past, but it makes complete sense, especially carrying firearms, sharp objects such as arrows with broadheads, razor sharp knives. I mean, hunting in bear
We
country,
have everything. We had everything in there except the tourniquet.
except
We had
for, yep,
gauze,
quick clot, all that kind of stuff.
tons of
There are
stuff.
some
Yeah.
basic items you should have in your first aid kit. I believe now that, especially after talking with your brother Matt, I believe now that every person should have a tourniquet in their first aid kit, whether you're just hunting in the whitetail woods or you're going on some big excursion in the West or Alaska or something like that. I think it's smart to have a tourniquet, and not only just having one, but actually knowing how to use it. It could save your life, or it could save a limb, depending on what kind of accident you have. I actually just talked to your brother the other night, and he said that he would be willing to come on the podcast and actually talk about some first aid stuff. Um, for We haven't really talked about this, but Chris's brother Matt is a first responder. He's a police officer, and he's recently started doing a lot of trainings for first responders, especially when it comes to like emergency medical services, and really um, jumping into those emergency situations in providing potentially life-saving care. He was the one that taught us how to use a tourniquet and some other things. He was also in the Marines. Did a lot of cool stuff there pertaining to that as well, and so he actually does trainings for first responders in this area. And so I asked him if he'd be willing to come on the podcast and talk to us about um, some first aid related content as it pertains to hunters in the backcountry, and different things that could save your life in the event that something, the worst possible thing happens. And so that will be a future episode. Keep an eye out for that. I don't know exactly when that'll be, but I think that'll be a really interesting topic to talk about. But so more to come on first aid, but basic stuff to have gauze, have a tourniquet, know how to use that stuff, have alcohol wipes to clean things up, band-aids, just some of the basic stuff, and we'll get into some more of the more intense stuff when we have Matt on in an upcoming episode. But kind of turning from first aid basics, Chris, let's touch on, we've touched on it a little bit in past episodes, but let's touch on navigating through rough terrain a little bit. um, we've been through some really rough terrain in some of our past hunts. So, what would you say are some tips that you have found to be important in staying safe in challenging environments and terrain?
Well, we're back to boots. we're back to taking care of your feet. If you don't have sound feet on you, you shouldn't be in challenging terrain where you don't have a good pair of boots.
Watch those ankles.
That you can't walk. You ain't getting out of deep woods. I'll tell you that much. Or you're gonna need a life light. That's what the terminology is? Life light?
Lifeline. I don't
No,
know.
the helicopter.
Oh,
Life
yeah.
flight, right? Rough terrain. I mean, if you're well, you could find rough terrain anywhere. There's rough terrain all over the place, depending on how physically fit you are.
Know your limitations, I think, would be number one, especially depending on
Yeah,
your fitness level. Um, yeah, some of the
I
country
mean,
we've been in has been surprising, for sure. Kicked our butts a little bit. Um, definitely know your limits, and if you feel that you have some physical limitations because of your fitness, work on your fitness, and then you won't have to worry about it quite as much. Anyway, I'll let you continue.
yeah.
That's what I'm
Well, yeah.
passionate about. So
There are those of you that are, your just disposition is more athletic, and you're still youthful, young. Uh, your mind will tell you at one point that you can do something, and your body won't be able to do it. I'm experiencing that as I'm about to venture towards 40 this year. I'll be 40 in this hunting season. How exciting. Wow. I'm sorry. It's just crazy to me. Life is so quick. And I was just talking to my wife about this. You go from 20 and thinking, your 20s is all, at least for me, was big dreams and everything's possible. And I'm going to do all these things. And, uh, your 20s is kind of filled. There's aspects of anxiety. You don't even know who you are yet in your 20s. You're coming out of your parents' ecosystem or your teenage years, so you are making decisions on your own now as an adult. And then you get into your 30s and you start to realize, because like in your 20s you're like, oh, there's a party or the people are going here. Yeah, I'm in. Like, let's go. And you don't really, I don't think you say no. I don't even know if it's in the vocabulary, at least for me. And that's not like being uh dangerous or living a less than honorable lifestyle or anything like that. That's not what I'm touching on. You can still say yes to hanging out with people and doing all the things in life that life has to offer from a moral standpoint, I
I
guess.
think the point you're getting at, Chris, is
But
that when you're in your 20s, you feel like you can do anything, and you maybe kind of can, but as you get older, uh, things change in a hurry.
I'm rabbit holing right now from the standpoint of I'm in this. It's not. I don't know if it's a midlife crisis. It's just a very heavy sense of the brevity of life.
Mm-hmm.
I have my daughter's birthday, uh, and she's 5, and I'm like, where did the time go? And at 20 years old, graduating film school and working on movie sets, and you just think your life's going to be one way, and then I got into my 30s, and then I had dated some individuals, and I'm giving a little bit more life context right now, but I am in this awe of like tips for staying safe in challenging environments. But I can't help but speak to the fact that in your 30s you begin to say no. Like I can't help to speak to the fact, sorry, of my experience from when I started hunting as a little kid to now, and how the different decades of my life have necessitated me approaching hunting differently.
Mm-hmm.
Because now when we go out west, I am on the cusp of like I can, you've seen me, I can hold my own. We hike and we rock and roll, and I don't think anybody's waiting around for me. There are times when you hit like some inclines or something, and you all might have to just go, okay, let's take a break here. But it's not to the point of like huffing and puffing and causing teams considerable miles from a time standpoint. But I can sense myself now getting there, like prepping and going out and walking, or putting your pack on and carrying the weight. So I think staying safe in those environments is we're speaking to. You have to know your limits. You have to understand, if you're in up and down terrain, again, know your backdrop for what you're shooting at. Somebody could be through the brush that way. They could be down where you can't see them. We're back to ethics. We're back to stewardship in this space. So, and have the right tools and equipment. You doesn't matter if you go deck yourself out in all the best gear.
Mm-hmm.
That'd be really fun, and that sounds really awesome. Like you can do that, whoever you are, because I don't think there's a limit to what you can spend in hunting, and that's the honest truth. I don't think you can have it all. I think you can have all the money in the world and keep buying, but you will always find a necessity or a cool new tool, or somebody's made something that's gonna add more fun, uh, or memories, like in their tent or stove, or it keeps building. It's always fun. That's what's so fun about it. So all that to say, you have to understand what you're capable of, and you have to be mindful not to get lost in the pursuit.
Mm-hmm.
Like you want to come home at the end of the day, you want to get out there again at the end of the day on another hunt and look forward to something again. And um, I'm sure there are people who have done crazy, downright stupid things. I've heard some crazy Alaska stories where a guy hiked this crazy mountain in a storm, and he fell and he broke his rifle in two. And when he fell into this like ice cold river. I don't know if you know who I'm talking about, but it might have been a YouTube hunt, but he either had to go back and scrap the hunt, or he was trying to get to this cabin up in the woods, and he was solo hunting. I'm not a solo hunter. I'm not really, at least out west. I'm not really. I think I would highly appreciate it, and it would be a highly spiritual experience. But I don't know if I want to. Like I like having the safety of a teammate there
Mm-hmm.
to share with that. But anyways, he hikes in this blizzard and he's soaking wet, and he literally gets to the cabin and he's trying to light and I think the cabin had been hit by a bear, so it was all torn apart. And all he could do was like try to light this stove, and he like went through 50 of the 54 matches he had like because he couldn't get it to light. And that's just like knowing your limits, knowing if something does happen out there, what do you do, how do you rationalize the best case scenario to stay safe. And he duct taped. He had a thing of duct tape at this cabin, and he duct taped the rifle, the buttstock of it back on, and went out and hunted and was successful apparently. But
Jeez.
like crazy story, right?
Yeah.
Crazy story. And I'm just like, you are awesome and insane all at the same time. But we've been on some cliffs and some rocky terrain. I think that's been the biggest part. I think the next one is weather, or weather would probably be first. But just as I'm talking about it, how are you sweating? Are you cold? Do you have a
Hmm.
stove? Like, what's your sleeping situation
What's your
like? Are
plan
you
if it
feeling your
starts raining?
there's all these things in there to triage worst case scenarios, which we have tarps. Like we talk through these things. Well, we could need this. Well, we might have to bring this. And at least if you have something in the truck, in your backup regiment, if you've had the opportunity to drive out, that's way better because you can get out there and then check the weather. We always say do a weather and ACT check, air traffic control check, which isn't anything for hunting, but it's just fun to say. I'm a little bit of got some pilot history in me, and my dad as well too. But yeah, is there anything beyond that of boots, gear, knowing yourself, and not being risky? I mean,
Yeah, I think not taking unnecessary risks. I mean, going on dangerous terrain, there's always going to be some inherent risk there, but I think it's just taking calculated risks in, really trying to minimize those potential accidents is a big thing because
we're not even touching on like predators, like big game,
no,
like grizzlies.
I-
We're not even touching any of that space, but
be bear
that's a
aware.
whole nother ball
Yeah,
game.
yeah, it's a whole
Yeah.
different
Bear
thing.
spray, sidearm. Like, are you getting a guided hunt where somebody's like, well,
Hmm.
I got my big rifle out to walk with you while you bow hunt. There's those options out there. Because it's no joke. You don't come back from a grizzly attack most of the time.
Yeah, yeah. Well, anyway, I think that's a good place to kind of wrap it up, Chris. On a solemn note.
Watch out for the bears.
Watch out for the bears,
Yeah.
people. No, I think
So
I
yeah,
think that's a good place to end it. For the next episode, we're going to talk about after the hunt, which I really enjoy talking about because it has a lot to do with not just the important things that happen after a hunt when it comes to like taking care of game once you're successful, once you have an animal on the ground, then what, that kind of stuff. I also love talking about the actual reflection of a hunt and what that means for us as hunters and how we can use that reflection to improve and learn from not only our successes but also our mistakes. So, unless Chris, you have anything else to add, I think we'll wrap this one up.
no, just like, comment, subscribe,
Mm.
help us out. Like yeah, I would love to hear from you guys. Listen to these episodes and different topics or suggestions. If we missed anything, or if we need, please don't be like. I mean, I welcome the fact checker, but I don't want like the Facebook fact checkers, that are
We
no
won't.
longer can see this. You no longer can see this content. It has been deemed not something. I just
Well, I
want
think I
to. I
think
like the
that's. I
community.
think the third-party fact checkers are pretty much going away now, Chris, with the current administration. But
I'm okay with like our listeners saying, "Hey, you missed this," but let's
yeah,
again. I'm
we'll
always in the pursuit of being better.
we'll
So
never claim to be perfect. So if we messed up on something, go ahead and let us know because we love to learn too. But
if you have another option besides a tourniquet, let us know.
just get a tourniquet. And according to Matt, don't get the cheap Chinese ones they sell on Amazon. Get the real ones
Yes,
from the one website
that is
that I don't
key.
remember.
Don't get the cheap Chinese ones.
Even though I'm sure those will work in a pinch. But anyway, thanks for
Aha,
listening,
get it a
guys.
pinch.
Yeah, that's a good pun. Thanks for listening, guys. We'll see you on the next one.